Hey, welcome. If you're here, I'm guessing you're either curious or tired. Maybe both. Tonight we're going to talk about a goddess who wasn't born from love, or chaos, or some beautiful tragic accident. No, she was born from a headache, a really, really bad one. This is the story of Athena, goddess of wisdom, war, invention, and cities. The one who never flinched, never fell in love, never lost control, and never, ever lost a fight that mattered. Her story starts at the top of Mount Olympus, with Zeus, king of the gods, clutching his head in agony. Not because of guilt or hangovers or divine stress, but because there was a fully armored daughter growing inside his skull. When the pain finally became unbearable, he did the only logical thing. He asked Hephaestus to split his head open with an axe, and from that crack in the sky, Athena stepped out, fully grown, wearing bronze armor, silent, calm, and probably very disappointed in her first day of existence. But that's only the beginning. Athena is one of the most complex figures in Greek mythology. She's the goddess of strategy, of logic, of cities and civilization, but also of war. Not the wild, bloodthirsty kind. That was Ares. Athena preferred war with a plan, quiet dominance, strength without the mess. She helped heroes win wars, tamed beasts, and built cities from stone. She could be kind, she could be just, but she could also be ruthless. Ask Medusa, ask Arachne, ask the city that didn't choose her. Over the next little while, we're going to explore Athena's myths, her birth, her rivalries, her inventions, and the mortals who either impressed her or infuriated her. This isn't a loud story. There's no screaming, just quiet power, calculated judgment, and an owl always watching from somewhere in the dark. So go ahead, get comfortable, dim the lights, let your mind slow down. You don't need to remember every detail, just let the story drift. And if you're still awake for a moment longer, feel free to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these myths travel. And if you enjoy this kind of calm storytelling, liking and subscribing helps the channel more than you know. Now, let's go back to the top of Olympus, to a god with a splitting headache, and the moment a goddess of reason and war decided to make her entrance. Let's begin with a prophecy, because in Greek mythology, things rarely start with a plan. They start with panic. Zeus, king of the gods, cloud gatherer, wielder of thunder, had a problem. And that problem, as usual, involved a woman. Her name was Metis. Metis wasn't just any goddess. She was clever, dangerous, really. The kind of clever that made other gods nervous. She was one of the old Titans, daughter of Oceanus and Tethys, a quiet force of cunning and thought. The original goddess of wisdom, long before Athena arrived on the scene. At some point, Zeus decided to seduce her. Whether Metis agreed, resisted, or was tricked, well, ancient sources disagree, as they often do when it comes to Zeus. But after it happened, a prophecy came down like a cold wind through Olympus. Metis would bear a daughter, and then a son. And that son would be more powerful than his father. That was all Zeus needed to hear. He'd already seen what happened when a son overthrew his father. He had done it to Cronus. Cronus had done it to Uranus. This was a family tradition, and not a pleasant one. So Zeus did what any paranoid king of the gods might do. He swallowed Metis whole, just like that. One moment she was there, clever and alive, and the next she was gone, consumed, tucked away inside Zeus's belly. or mind, or spirit, or something. Myth isn't always concerned with anatomical logistics, but Metis didn't die. No, she was still inside Zeus, still thinking, still existing, and she was pregnant, which brings us to the headache. It started as a pressure behind the eyes. Then it bloomed into a throb that refused to fade. And then, sometime later, Zeus found himself stumbling across Olympus, clutching his head like it was about to break. He tried everything: prayers, spells, probably ambrosia. Nothing helped. Until finally, in desperation, Zeus summoned Hephaestus, the blacksmith god. Depending on the version you read, it might have been Prometheus, or Hermes, or even Palamon, but Hephaestus is the one most often credited. Zeus begged him to help, to cut open his head, and, with the same calm professionalism one might use to open a particularly difficult olive jar, Hephaestus raised his hammer and brought it down. There was a flash, a crack, a sound like thunder through marble, and then she emerged, fully grown, armored, radiant, shield in one hand, spear in the other, helmet already in place. Athena. No crying, no confusion, no childhood. She stepped out of Zeus's skull like she'd been waiting for centuries. And in that moment, the myths say, all of Olympus paused. Even the sun stopped to watch her. She didn't scream or laugh. She didn't ask questions. She simply stood tall, eyes sharp, every line of her face already knowing far more than she would ever say. It was the most logical birth in mythological history, and also the least natural one. Athena stood in silence. No wailing, no blood, no hesitation. Her armor gleamed with divine sheen, forged, it seemed, from the raw idea of strategy itself. Even the gods didn't quite know what to say. Here was a being born of intellect, not impulse. She didn't rush to greet the world. She assessed it. Her gaze was steady, as if every corner of Olympus was already known to her, as if she had planned her entrance down to the second. Zeus, understandably, was relieved. No raging sun, no uprising, just a daughter, loyal, brilliant, powerful, one who, by all accounts, admired him, or at least respected him. The other gods were more cautious. Hera, Zeus's wife, was not pleased. Not with the swallowing of Meti, not with the miraculous daughter that emerged without her, not with how much attention Zeus lavished on Athena afterward. Because Zeus loved this daughter, not in the way he loved his other divine children, the chaotic, impulsive ones who inherited his flaws. Athena was different. She didn't need taming. She didn't cause trouble. She offered plans, not problems. And that made her dangerous, in a different way. Athena quickly became indispensable. She wasn't loud, she wasn't affectionate, but she got things done. Need to plan a war campaign. Athena already had the battle map. Need to build a city. She had sketches drawn and civic systems outlined. Need to stop Ares from smashing something. She'd handle it, quietly. She didn't brag. She didn't boast. She simply did what no one else could. With precision, clarity, and, when necessary, a very sharp spear. Unlike Ares, the god of bloodlust and brute strength, Athena represented controlled warfare, tactics, discipline. To the Greeks, she was the kind of warrior you wanted to have on your side, not because she would kill for you, but because she'd outthink your enemies before the first sword was even drawn. She became a patroness of heroes, architects, philosophers, and artists. And while she was not a warm goddess, she was a present one, a mind you could rely on, if you could keep up. Athena never married, never took a lover, never had children. She was one of the three so-called virgin goddesses, alongside Artemis and Hestia, meaning she was self-contained, complete. In Greek terms, virginity wasn't just about abstaining from relationships. It was a symbol of independence, of refusing to be owned. But Athena's virginity carried something else too: attention. She often acted as a maternal figure, protective, wise, nurturing in her own rigid way. But she also showed deep discomfort with mortal sexuality, feminine vanity, and anything that hinted at emotional vulnerability. She was cerebral to a fault, and this made her both admired and, at times, feared. She was the goddess of intellect in a pantheon ruled by feelings. That set her apart. Of all her divine siblings, Athena's most visible rivalry was with Ares, both gods of war, but that's where the similarities ended. Ares was chaos, rage, the scream on the battlefield. Athena was the silence before the scream, the pause, the calculation, the ambush perfectly timed. Mortals respected Athena, feared Ares. Zeus himself is said to have favored Athena's style of warfare. After all, she was his mind made manifest, his logic, his legacy. Ares, on the other hand, was unpredictable. Even Zeus found him irritating. In one myth, Zeus declares that Ares is the most hated of all his children. Athena, meanwhile, received praise, even when she delivered justice that was cold or cruel. She wasn't beloved, exactly, but she was trusted. And in a pantheon where trust was rare, that mattered. Athena's most iconic symbols began to emerge in this period. Her shield, the Aegis, was a gift from Zeus, or possibly crafted by Hephaestus, and it bore the terrifying head of Medusa, the Gorgon. It wasn't just armor, it was a message, a symbol of fear and awe. To look upon Athena's shield was to see death, to see justice, to see the consequences of misjudging her. She also carried a spear and wore a helmet, often tilted just slightly back, as if she were always ready, always listening. But the most enduring symbol, the owl, a quiet bird, watchful, nocturnal, not a predator of flash and violence, but one of precision and patience. The owl became her companion and her calling card, wisdom in flight, a reminder that Athena did not sleep. She observed. She was always a step ahead. As her legend grew, so did her influence. She would soon find herself in a contest, one that would decide her place in the world of mortals, a contest that would pit her against another powerful god, a god who ruled the sea, a god with a trident and a temper, Poseidon. But that story belongs to the next chapter. For now, we leave Athena standing beneath the open sky, fresh from the mind of Zeus, armed and awake, with the world laid out before her like a battlefield waiting to be understood. A goddess born from thought, living thought, sharp as lightning, quiet as an owl in the dark. And she has only just begun. It's strange sometimes to think that a city could choose its god, but Athens did, and in doing so, it revealed more about itself and the gods than anyone expected. The story begins long before marble temples and democracy, back when the land was new and the gods were still establishing their domains. There was a small, promising region in Attica, rich in hills and olives and sea breeze, a perfect place for a city. And two gods, powerful, prideful, and both rather fond of being in charge, wanted it. One was Poseidon, god of the sea, unpredictable, proud, stormy. The other, of course, was Athena. Now, Poseidon had never been one to ask nicely. He arrived with thunder in his voice and his trident in hand, and with a single blow, he struck the earth. From the crack in the rock, a spring burst forth, water bubbling and blue. It was dramatic, impressive, loud, and at first it seemed like a strong offering, but when the people came to taste the water, they grimaced. Salt water, undrinkable. Poseidon had given them a sea, beautiful, yes, but dangerous, treacherous, a thing that belonged to him, not to them. Then came Athena. No lightning, no crashing waves. She simply knelt, placed her hand upon the earth, and there, from the soil, grew the first olive tree. It wasn't flashy, but it was useful. The tree offered food, oil, wood, shade, peace. A living gift, not a threat. And in that quiet, clever act, the people saw something they understood. A goddess who would give them civilization, not storms. They chose her. Poseidon, naturally, did not take this well. He was not used to losing, especially not to a woman, and certainly not to a gift so practical. According to one version of the myth, he flooded the Attic plain in retaliation. In another, he cursed the land with drought. There are even versions in which he and Athena continued to feud for generations, through champions, monsters, and spiteful divine acts. But the decision stood. The city would be called Athens, and Athena became its eternal guardian. She was often portrayed standing atop its acropolis, watching over the citizens, not with warmth exactly, but with investment, with responsibility. To Athena, ruling meant more than power. It meant stewardship, order, and maybe even love. The kind of love that isn't loud or sentimental, but committed. It wasn't long before the Athenians began to build for her, and build big. The most famous of these monuments was the Parthenon, a temple of staggering beauty, symmetry, and ambition. Its name comes from Parthenos, meaning virgin, a reference to Athena's celibate independence. But it was more than just a temple. It was a declaration. To worship Athena wasn't to sing and dance. It was to study, to build, to reason, to live in a city that asked you to think. Inside the Parthenon stood a statue, one of the wonders of the ancient world. It was massive, made of gold and ivory. Athena Parthenos, as sculpted by Phidias. In one hand she held Nike, the winged spirit of victory. In the other, a shield. At her feet, a serpent, a reminder of the old earth, of the primal dangers she had mastered. Across her armor, the face of Medusa, terrifying, yes, but under her control. It wasn't just a statue, it was a message. This goddess wasn't here to entertain. She was here to rule, calmly, wisely, and with unflinching strength. The olive tree became her signature. To the Athenians, it wasn't just a plant. It was a symbol of peace, prosperity, and sacred protection. To this day, they claimed that the original tree, the one Athena gifted during the contest, still stood on the Acropolis near the Erechtheion. Even when burned during invasions, it was said to grow back, unkillable, eternal, like Athena herself. Olive oil was used for cooking, for lighting lamps, for anointing bodies, for rituals. In winning that contest, Athena didn't just give the city a crop. She gave them an economy, a future. The Athenians built ships, wrote laws, debated in stone forums, and poured their identity into intellect and innovation. And at the heart of it all was her, the goddess who had asked for nothing except the chance to serve them with her mind. But not everything about Athena's rule was soft. For all her wisdom, she could be cold. There's a reason she was often called upon in courts and councils, not to comfort, but to clarify. Justice, to Athena, was not always gentle. She did not weep for the guilty. She did not forgive easily. She calculated. One of the earliest Athenian myths tied to her governance is the trial of Orestes, a man who murdered his mother, Clytemnestra. The gods were split. Some cried for punishment, others for mercy, and Athena, presiding over the trial, offered something new, a jury, not divine wrath, but civic process. It was a radical idea, mortal reason over divine vengeance. And when the votes were cast and came out even, Athena cast the deciding vote for acquittal. Not because she pitied him, but because civilization demanded process. As Athens grew in strength, philosophy, and empire, it often saw itself as an extension of Athena's ideals. When they were wise, they invoked her name. When they were cruel, they believed she understood. They built temples, waged wars, commissioned plays, invented democracy. And through it all, the owl remained, perched on coins, carved into stone, watching in silence. Athena wasn't a mother goddess. She wasn't the goddess of joy. She was the one you called on when things were difficult, when decisions had to be made, when you needed strength, not of body, but of mind, and the city she shaped was better for it. Flawed, ambitious, brilliant. Just like her. Athena didn't rage. She didn't charge into battle, teeth bared, blade raised. She didn't howl under a blood-red sky or chase down enemies for the thrill of it. That was Ares. Athena waited. She calculated. She watched for weak points, choke points, the angle of the sun. She counted spears, measured discipline, considered terrain. She thought. And in war, thought wins more battles than fury. That was her strength. To the Greeks, there were two ways to fight, with passion or with purpose. Ares represented passion, wild, uncontrollable violence. Athena was purpose, planning, the reason behind the sword. That's why so many of the great Greek heroes prayed to her, not Ares, because they didn't want to fight like animals. They wanted to win. Of all the myths where Athena appears, none hold more weight than the Trojan War. It's not just a war myth, it's the war myth. A decade of battle, betrayal, and divine meddling. And Athena was right in the middle of it. But she didn't cause it. That honor, or curse, goes to a golden apple. At the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, all the gods were invited, except Eris, goddess of discord. Understandably insulted, she threw a golden apple into the feast, inscribed with just 3 words: to the fairest. Immediately, 3 goddesses laid claim to it. Aphrodite, goddess of love, Hera, goddess of power, and Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. They brought the matter to a mortal, Paris, a Trojan prince. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera promised power. Athena offered unmatched skill in battle and wisdom. Aphrodite, she offered him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Paris chose Aphrodite, and that choice doomed Troy. Athena did not forget the insult. Athena took the side of the Greeks in the war, fiercely. She didn't just cheer from Olympus. She intervened, directly and often. She whispered strategies, guided spears, shielded chosen heroes with invisible force. She was especially fond of Odysseus, a clever, silver-tongued king with a mind that mirrored her own. He wasn't the strongest or the bravest, but he was the most strategic. She favored Diomedes too, a fierce warrior who with her help managed to wound even the gods. And of course, there was Achilles, the unstoppable Greek champion. Athena stood by him, even as his rage eclipsed reason. But she didn't just assist the Greeks, she shaped the tone of the war itself. When diplomacy failed, she supported the Trojan horse plan, not with magic, but with silence, with approval. She understood that wars are not won by force alone. They are won by deception, patience, and timing. Traits the Greeks had, traits the Trojans lacked. When Troy finally burned, Athena's role was felt everywhere. The horse, left outside the gates, was a gift the Trojans should have questioned. It was Athena's name that helped disguise its intent, a gift to the goddess meant to secure safe passage home. But inside, Greek soldiers waited, and when the city slept, the gates opened, and Troy fell. Athena had no pity, no regret. She had chosen her side, and her side had won, but even she had limits. When the Greeks, in their arrogance, defiled her temples during the sack of Troy, dragging women from her altars, burning what should not be burned, Athena turned cold. Their victory had become hubris, and that, even from allies, she could not accept. She punished them, scattered them across the seas, delayed their journeys home, watched as their own pride undid what she had helped them win. Despite her fury, Athena remained a protector of mortals, just specific ones. She didn't aid everyone. She chose carefully, quietly, and when she did, it was almost never with overwhelming force. She didn't hurl lightning bolts or raise the dead. She gave ideas. When Perseus set out to slay Medusa, Athena gave him the mirror-like shield that let him strike without looking directly at her. She guided his hand, not as a warrior beside him, but as a thought within him. When Heracles faced his 12 labors, she was there, not to do the work for him, but to advise, to steady, to teach. When Bellerophon sought to ride Pegasus, she gave him the golden bridle that allowed the beast to be tamed, always indirect, always smart. She didn't conquer monsters. She taught mortals how to do it, and in doing so, she made them into more than heroes. She made them symbols. Athena was wise, she was just, she was measured, but she was not forgiving. Worshippers came to her not for comfort, but for clarity. She wasn't the goddess who would cradle you when you wept. She was the one who would quietly ask what you'd learned. And when mortals failed her standards, when they boasted, defied, or disrespected what she stood for, the consequences came swiftly and permanently. Because for all her logic, Athena had one blind spot: pride. Not her own, but yours. Once, in the region of Lydia, there lived a mortal woman named Arachne. She was no princess, no prophetess, just a weaver, but a brilliant one. Her tapestries were so intricate, so flawless, that people began to whisper that she must have been taught by the gods. And Arachne, she didn't deny it. In fact, she challenged it. If Athena herself were to compete against me, she said, I would still win. You can guess how that went. Athena appeared, disguised at first as an old woman, warning Arachne to humble herself before the gods. But Arachne didn't flinch. She doubled down. And so the contest began. Two looms, two minds. One immortal, one mortal. Athena wove a tapestry of the gods in all their power. Glory, justice, order. Arachne wove something else. Scenes of the gods' mistakes, their cruelty, their vanity, and the worst part, it was perfect. Technically, artistically, unflawed. Athena didn't destroy the work, she destroyed the weaver. Some say she struck Arachne down in rage. Others say Arachne hanged herself in shame, and Athena, taking pity, transformed her into the first spider, doomed to weave forever. Mercy? Maybe. But also a warning. You've heard her name, Medusa, the monster with snakes for hair and a gaze that turns flesh to stone. But her story wasn't always monstrous. In the oldest versions, Medusa was a mortal woman, beautiful, devout, a priestess of Athena. But then came Poseidon. He desired her, and in some versions of the myth, he assaulted her inside one of Athena's temples, a brutal, violent act committed in a place that was meant to be sacred. And Athena, she didn't punish Poseidon. She punished Medusa, turned her into a monster, banished her from the temple, cursed her to be feared, hunted, and ultimately killed. It's one of the coldest stories in all of Greek myth. Uncomfortable, unfair, and yet consistent. Athena did not protect emotion. She protected order. To violate her temple, even as a victim, was to shatter that order. And so Medusa paid the price, a cruel one. But Athena, ever pragmatic, later used the Gorgon's head as a weapon. It was mounted on her shield, the Aegis, and carried into battle to terrify her enemies. A monster made, a punishment endured, a tool repurposed. Before she was a goddess of cities and empires, Athena was young, and once she had a friend named Pallas. They were said to be equals in youth, both skilled in arms, close as sisters, always sparring. One day, during a training match, Athena struck too hard. A mistake. A death. Pallas fell. And Athena, devastated, took her friend's name as her own, calling herself Pallas Athena in memory. But there's more. In some versions, Athena didn't just strike too hard. She let Pallas win. And when Zeus, worried for his daughter, interfered with a thunderbolt, it startled Athena into delivering a fatal blow. It's a small myth, quiet, tucked into older texts, but it lingers, a reminder that even the goddess of thought could act in fear, could lose control, could kill someone she loved, and then bury it beneath a title. Athena prized restraint, which made the violation of privacy, even accidental, feel like betrayal. Tiresias, a young man in Thebes, once stumbled upon Athena bathing in a forest spring. He looked. He wasn't meant to. He saw the goddess nude, not in desire, but in shock. Still, he saw. Athena was furious. But instead of killing him, she blinded him, took his sight with a gesture, and then, a second later, she gave him something else, the gift of prophecy. He could no longer see the world, but he could see truth. To Athena, perhaps that was fair. Punishment, then reward. Pain, then purpose. But it was still a reminder. To witness her vulnerability, even for a moment, was to pay a price. Most gods were worshipped out of fear. Athena was worshipped out of respect. She didn't promise salvation. She didn't offer indulgence, vengeance, or romantic deliverance. She offered clarity. To the Greeks, this made her more than a goddess. She was a pillar of cities, of civilization, of thought itself. Her symbols weren't wild or mysterious. They were practical: a spear, a shield, a loom, an olive tree, a scroll, an owl. To pray to Athena was to ask for wisdom in decision, to guide your hands and your mind. Whether you were crafting a legal argument, building a ship, or weaving a tapestry, she was not a patron of the supernatural. She was the goddess of the human mind, sharpened to its highest point. We often associate Athena with war and justice, but her gifts were just as present in the daily lives of artisans. She was the patron of weaving, and through it, all textile arts. Spinning thread, dyeing cloth, pattern design. These weren't just chores. They were acts of thought, precision, harmony. A poorly woven garment could mean a freezing winter. A well-made sail could carry a ship across oceans. A tapestry could tell a story no mouth dared speak. Athena honored that. She watched the quiet genius in those who worked with their hands, so long as they did it humbly. She was also revered by blacksmiths and craftsmen, not in place of Hephaestus, but alongside him. While he gave them fire and tools, she gave them design, the blueprint, the mental map, the how and why. Cities built aqueducts in her name. Engineers traced her symbols before solving complex problems. Artists looked to her not for divine inspiration, but for discipline, the quiet, maddening focus it takes to create something meaningful. Beyond tools and textiles, Athena was the goddess of civic life. She was invoked in courts of law, not for mercy but for fairness. She helped found the very concept of trial by jury, and stood for the idea that justice could be something more than revenge. But she also had a hand in government, especially in Athens, where her influence was everywhere. Not just temples, not just statues, but institutions, ideas. The Greeks believed that a well-run city was an act of devotion, that a fair policy was a kind of offering, that to think clearly, to vote wisely, to speak thoughtfully, these were rituals in her honor. She was a goddess of words spoken calmly, of arguments laid out like stonework, of structure, both architectural and intellectual. She was, in many ways, the mother of logic. Athena was a woman, but she was not a goddess of womanhood. She defied every expected category. She didn't marry, she didn't mother children, she didn't embrace the domestic sphere, except when it could be intellectualized, as with weaving. This made her both a figure of admiration and distance for many Greek women. Some looked to her as proof that a woman could be powerful, intelligent, and untouched by male authority. Others saw her as cold, detached, even complicit in punishing other women, Medusa, Arachne, to preserve the structures of Olympus. In truth, Athena belonged to no one. She stood alone, not above the world, but outside its categories. Even her title, Pallas Athena, hints at a loss, a memory, a friend she may have killed. She was, as always, full of paradox. When the Romans adopted Greek mythology, they rarely left it unchanged. Zeus became Jupiter, Aphrodite became Venus, and Athena became Minerva. The Roman version of Athena kept much of her original spirit, wisdom, warfare, reason, but she was softened slightly, less confrontational, more academic. Minerva became a goddess of knowledge, libraries, schools, memory. By the Middle Ages, She appeared in manuscripts as a kind of distant, saint-like figure of divine reason. And by the Renaissance, her image flourished in painting, sculpture, and political symbolism. She came to represent enlightenment, republican values, intellect. In some depictions, she's even shown shielding science from the arrows of ignorance, a protector not just of thought, but of progress. Her Roman owl, now a fixture of Western symbolism, still sits atop crests and flags and book covers, the ever-watching eye of wisdom. Athena never needed prayers, she needed questions. Not praise, but thought. She wasn't the goddess who told you what to believe. She was the one who asked if you'd thought it through. And in a world that often prizes speed, passion, and reaction, her silence is still powerful. She lives in blueprints and courtroom oaths, in essays and urban planning, in the hush before a debate begins, in every quiet moment where someone chooses reason over rage. So no, she wasn't warm, she wasn't kind, but she was true. And for a city that chose her, and for all those who still do, that was more than enough.